We begin this morning with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo under pressure to resign after an investigation by the state attorney general's office concluded he sexually harassed nearly a dozen women, most of them state employees.
The AG's 165-page report alleges Governor Cuomo engaged in unwelcome and non-consensual touching, that he made numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature, and created a hostile work environment for women. Cuomo has repeatedly denied the allegations and did so again yesterday in a pre-recorded video after the AG's report was released.
I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances. I am 63 years old. I've lived my entire adult life in public view. That is just not who I am, and that's not who I have ever been.
Now, in the wake of the AG's report, the Democratic Speaker of New York State Assembly now says lawmakers plan to conclude their impeachment investigation as quickly as possible, adding that he believes Cuomo can no longer remain in office. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter, and NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos. Tom, I want to start with you. These findings by the New York Attorney General's office come after a 5-month investigation. What were the main takeaways from the report?
Well, this report, Joe, details, as Savannah said, 11 separate victims here, ranging from a state trooper who was detailed to the governor's protective detail, to the nurse and the doctor that performed the COVID-19 test live on the governor during the height of the pandemic last year. It's 70 subpoenas were involved in this, 74,000 documents, 179 interviews were conducted, 41 under oath, following up on 280 tips from the public. This report detailed not only the sexual harassment, but it also detailed the culture and the climate in the governor's office. It's one of the things New York Attorney General Letitia James spoke about yesterday.
Governor Cuomo's administration fostered a toxic workplace that enabled harassment and created a hostile work environment where staffers did not feel comfortable coming forward with complaints about sexual harassment due to a climate of fear and given the power dynamics.
The legal fallout from that report has already started, with the Albany County District Attorney's Office saying that they're going to look at this as part of an ongoing criminal investigation, Joe.
Danny, let's talk about the governor's response. His attorney is slamming the AG's report, calling it biased. He released an 85-page response, which included dozens of photos, some showing Governor Cuomo hugging, kissing, touching other politicians, some photos showing other politicians, including President Biden and former President Barack Obama, making similar hugging and kissing gestures with others. Cuomo is arguing the governor's behavior is typical among people in politics. Do you think this defense holds up?
Not very well. I mean, those same photos were part of the governor's B-roll in his video that he released yesterday, which was kind of a statement slash kind of like a documentary, because they ran B-roll of him doing the exact same thing over his statement. And so putting those photos in is really going to read to a lot of people akin to an argument of, hey, other people do this, so it's totally okay. That's not really a good argument, even if it's true. And especially because those photos of George Bush and Barack Obama, I mean, there must be context behind those interactions. Just showing that he may do this with consent with other people doesn't mean that he didn't commit the alleged offenses. So I don't see this as a criminal matter, but I think the authorities have to go through the motions and at least investigate it.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in a second. Tom, President Biden is one of Cuomo's longtime friends, but now he's joining the growing calls for Governor Cuomo to resign. What can you tell us about that? Well,
I think at this point, Joe, it would be easier for us to tell you who hasn't called for the governor to resign than it would be to list all the people who have. But when you have the person who's, essentially at the top of the party and the president of the United States calling for your resignation, it's pretty serious. Here's what the president had to say yesterday.
I'm sure there are some embraces that were totally innocent, but apparently the Attorney General decided there were things that weren't. I think he should resign.
So I think going forward here, it's going to be interesting to see what the governor does. He's still a very powerful person in the state, even after yesterday's report. He's got a number of horses he might feel like he could be able to trade. But, Joe, we'll just have to see how much power he does have left.
Yeah, Danny, let's talk about what's next. The Albany County DA now says his office is conducting an investigation into Cuomo's behavior. Here's what he told NBC's Lester Holt last night on Nightly News.
But I think after today's presentation, which here in Albany County, we were witnessing at the same time that the rest of New Yorkers were witnessing, it's pretty clear that we have an obligation here.
Now, to be clear, Governor Cuomo has not been charged with anything. But Tom, or I should ask Danny, I believe, is this just the beginning when it comes to criminal or civil investigations? What's next here? I guess, Tom, that question's for you.
Sure, Joe. So I think, when you look at this, there's a couple of different things that could come up. One of them being that a lot of the activity that involved a former member of his detail, a New York State trooper, involved incidents that occurred in Mount Kisco, New York. Now, that's a separate jurisdiction than Albany County. That's Westchester County. That's the home of Mimi Rocco, who's a former NBC News analyst. She's the district attorney there. So we'll have to watch and see whether or not she starts to look into that. The conduct that's alleged involving the former member of his detail, the New York State trooper, is pretty specific. There's a detailed timeline corroborated by her colleagues in the New York State Police. So that might be another avenue. And of course, the civil suits, as you suggested, by any one of these 11 women could be coming shortly.
All right, Tom and Danny, thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Now to major news from right here in New York City. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that the city will mandate proof of vaccination for many leisure activities, and that's a first for a major U.S. city.
This is a miraculous place, literally full of wonders. And if you're vaccinated, all that's going to open up to you. You'll have the key. You can open the door. But if you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things. That's the point we're trying to get across. It's time for people to see vaccination as literally necessary to living a good and full and healthy life.
The program is called The Key to NYC Pass and will impact indoor dining, gyms, and concerts. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns joins us now from New York City. Dasha, good morning. So tell us more about what's included in this mandate and how's it going to work? How will it be enforced?
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, this is a major move in a city that was hit so hard so early on and is now going to be the first city in the United States to require proof of vaccination for indoor venues, things like restaurants, gyms, performance venues. Now, this will officially launch on August 16th. The mayor said that the next month or so is really going to be an education period where they'll be talking to business owners, to the public, to make sure that people really understand how this process is going to work. And then September 13th, begins the enforcement period. So there will be check-ins, there will be inspections. But Savannah, the overall message was really that, look, if you want to participate in society, you're going to have to get vaccinated. And if you're not vaccinated, this city is going to get a lot smaller and more limited for you, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely it will. All right, Dasha, let's talk through how business owners are reacting to this. I mean, they've been struggling throughout the pandemic, both to hire workers, but then also with people being able to come in and these different regulations and restrictions that have been enforced and then lifted. What's their reaction to this mandate? Because you see, on the one hand, maybe customers will feel, hey, I could be safe going inside there. But on the other, of course, it's limiting who can come into their restaurants or shops.
Right. I've been talking to business owners throughout this pandemic, and the biggest challenge they always talk about is the lack of clarity, sort of the confusion around constantly changing and evolving policy. And so I was curious about whether this would be more of a burden or a relief for business owners. I spoke to one restaurant owner here in Brooklyn. Take a listen to what she had to say about that.
Just having some clarity that's saying, like, what's going to happen is you can have your business as normal, but you're going to need to require that people are vaccinated. That is a relief. Like, just knowing what's going to happen in general for restaurants during this whole thing is always better than wondering what's going to happen. I think that that's like the prevailing thing that is happening in the hospitality industry is people trying to balance really wanting to welcome their guests and really wanting to keep their guests safe, and the unusual situation of having to enforce rules on them.
Savannah, she did say, though, that this restaurant is in a neighborhood where people have been pretty compliant and were actually early adopters for vaccines. She said she might feel different if she got a restaurant, somewhere in a neighborhood where people were less likely to get vaccinated. That might impact business, but overall, that clarity is really worth it. And by the way, if you are a customer, there are a few different ways you can prove vaccination. You can bring that paper card that you get when you get the shot. But if you're like me and can't hold on to a paper to save your life, there are digital options. The Excelsior Pass in New York allows you to show a digital version of the card. And then Key to NYC Pass will be launched by the city, which will be another way to prove vaccination, Savannah.
Yeah, since this was announced about midday yesterday, I have been on the hunt for mine. Dasha, thanks so much.
Hospitals in Arkansas overwhelmed with COVID patients are sounding the alarm. So is the state's Republican governor, who was actually booed and mocked at a recent town hall. We need to encourage people to get vaccinated and warned that hospitals are running out of space.
It's very real, the hospital shortage. It's absolutely very real. I think what we agree on is that COVID is real. People get sick from...
NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber is in Northwest Arkansas. Ellison, good morning. I know you've been speaking with doctors on the ground there, so you can tell us a little more about the situation in Arkansas. I mean, for people who maybe couldn't hear that soundbite there, one of the people who was jeering the governor actually said there was only one person at the hospital. Is that really the case there?
It's not, and it is not hard to find many people, from doctors to families who have needed care, that will tell you that is 100% not the case here at all. If you just look at the numbers, you will see it. This state saw its highest increase in COVID hospitalizations on Monday since the pandemic began. ICU, the people in ICUs because of COVID-19, that's up. The use of ventilators, that is up way more than it was a year ago. You heard the state's governor there pleading with people to get vaccinated. He's trying to warn people that the hospitalization crisis they have here, the shortage, that not only is it very real, but that it is very serious. But a lot of people, particularly in Northwest Arkansas, where we are and where that press conference took place, they simply do not believe it. You heard him there. He was mocked. He was jeered as he tried to talk to people about getting vaccinated. Only about 40% of people in this state are fully vaccinated. And the governor has been very clear, if that does not change, the situation where they are right now, it's going to get a whole lot worse. Joe?
Ellison, you also met with a young woman who was at that town hall and, like the governor, was jeered. What did she say to prompt that response?
Yeah, I mean, she went there because she wanted members of her community to know what happened to her family just last week. Her brother, Trey, he is immunocompromised. He has a lot of different health issues. He got very sick last week and they had to call an ambulance. But when the paramedics arrived, they were told the hospital where all his doctors are, they had no room. They tried another hospital, no room there. They waited 14 hours to get a bed for her brother. She told me that she thought he was going to die in her arms. Listen to what she told us.
The paramedics got there, and basically the first thing they said was, well, we're going to have to make some phone calls because all the hospitals in the area are diverting, and there's really nowhere we can take him right now.
I mean, how many times have you had to call an ambulance before, and have you ever been told, we can't go?
It's always been immediate.
If an individual chooses to not get vaccinated and then they wind up needing care at a hospital level, something that statistically the data shows us is largely preventable if you are vaccinated, there are very real consequences to that. When we're talking about hospitalizations, it is not just square footage, it is not just empty beds, it's staff. And what is happening here is COVID patients are needing a lot of care when they are hospitalized, and doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists are struggling to keep up with that demand in addition to their normal patient load. And people like Trey and the McFadden family, they're being told there is no room for them, and they are having to wait hours and hours when they desperately need help. Joe?
Such an important reminder. It's not just COVID patients who need hospital beds, but so many others. Ellison, thanks for your reporting.
Let's now bring in Dr. Bob Lahita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph's Health. And, of course, a friend of the show. Dr. Bob, it's great to see you, even though I'm going to start with a tough question, and it's with what Ellison just said. She said it's not just square footage, it's not just beds, it's staff. I mean, how dire is the situation at hospitals right now in these states with low vaccination rates? Is it like back to the beginning bad? What are you concerned about? Staff burnout or something like we just heard, the availability for other treatment besides COVID? I mean, tell us about the situation that hospitals, doctors, nurses, staff like yourself are facing.
Well, the doctors and nurses, Savannah, are exhausted, obviously. We had this lull in the early part of the summer, and we were hoping that things were finished. But now it's all coming back again. It's deja vu, where we see that the beds are being taken up in the ICU by COVID patients. And we see that the staff not only are burning out, but back to PPE, trying to gown and glove and make sure that we, the staff, do not get infected. This is really a stressful situation from both ends. The patients' problems, which are overwhelming, staff issues with PPE and protection, self-protection, and then also running out of beds, because then we have to create more ICUs and more beds have to be taken from patients that are non-COVIDs.
Now, doctor, let's also talk about the fact that Ellison's reporting, you know, statistically there, as we're seeing across many states, but where she was in Arkansas, that these people that are ending up in the hospital have not been vaccinated. So then you look at what New York City's doing, for example, this vaccine mandate. You can't go to a gym, you can't go to an indoor restaurant, you can't go to a concert, a play, anything indoors unless you're vaccinated. Do you think that restricting access to things that bring back normal life, things that people were excited to be able to do again, to the vaccinated only will be effective in getting people vaccinated and then therefore effective in limiting the spread of COVID cases?
Well, I think, Savannah, that's the mayor of New York is bringing an extreme amount of pressure onto people who are not vaccinated. And we've heard from the president and others that saying this is the pandemic of the unvaccinated, because 99% of the patients that are dying in hospitals are unvaccinated. So I understand what Mayor de Blasio is trying to do. I don't know whether he can enforce it. I'm hoping that we come to some sort of stability with regard to vaccination and the numbers that we're seeing rising every day. And so I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out because this is new.
Right. Absolutely. Lots to watch for in just the next couple of weeks as this comes into play. Dr. Bob Lahita, always great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Right now, let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather. And
Janessa Webb is with us again this morning. Hi, Janessa. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. And the weather, it's still not winning across the East Coast, unfortunately. We're still dealing with this stubborn rain, the bands of moisture. They're starting to push offshore, but it's going to be quite a day across the Carolinas into southern New England, even the Florida Panhandle that we're currently watching. But you can see this is a good dose of moisture that we're watching for the Carolina coast, all the way into West Virginia, Virginia as well, and even sections of New Jersey. Now, this is potentially flooding rain, forecasting 3-day storm totals of 6 to 10 inches for the Florida coast into the Panhandle as well. Things will start to die down for the mid-Atlantic, but the brunt of this storm, the northern edge, going to impact southern New England into Maine, where they could see an additional 2 to 3 inches. Also, you have a few more days of kind of that fall weather. I'm still smiling about it as temperatures are in the lower 80s, upper 70s in some spots. New York City, we're still about 6 degrees below average, and that's going to continue into your Thursday. Now, if you're a summer fan, man, the game starts to change. We are in August. The heat starts to build along with humidity as we go into the weekend, guys.
All right, we'll enjoy right now.
Yeah.
Before that happens.
Summer fan, but heat and humidity, not so much.
Thank you, Janessa.
Thanks. See you in a bit.